Nuts and seeds are tiny but mighty when it comes to our health. Just 3 servings per week can slash your risk of heart disease, cancer, and even depression, all while supporting your brain, liver, and immune system. So stick around to learn why these nutrient-packed little bundles of deliciousness joy deserve a spot in your regular routine. Hit me, Producer Potts.
Why are nuts and seeds a Nutrivore Foundational Food?
So nuts and seeds are by far our best and most reliable food sources of vitamin E, in addition to being packed with heart-healthy fats like oleic acid, alpha-linolenic acid, and linoleic acid. And they're also usually good sources of copper, magnesium, manganese, zinc, vitamin B1, biotin, folate, polyphenols, and phytosterols. And they've got beneficial fiber types too. Plus some of the highest magnitude of health benefit of any food we could possibly choose. So definitely a Nutrivore foundational food to focus on adding more of to our diets.
What are the health benefits of nuts and seeds?
There are so many, but let's start with cardiovascular disease. A 2023 meta-analysis showed that high versus low nut and seed consumption reduced risk of total cardiovascular disease by 19%, cardiovascular disease mortality by 23%, coronary heart disease by 18%, coronary heart disease mortality by 25%, and non-fatal coronary heart disease by 15%. This study's dose analysis showed that eating 1 ounce or about 30 grams of nuts and seeds per day reduced risk of cardiovascular disease by 24%. Eating nuts and seeds regularly reduces risk of developing cancer. A 2020 meta-analysis showed that higher nut consumption reduced risk of total cancer by 10%. And significant protective effects were seen with as little as 9 grams of nuts and seeds per day, which is like a third of a serving. And a 2023 meta-analysis showed that just 10 grams of tree nuts per day was associated with a 20% reduction in overall cancer mortality. Nuts and seeds improve glycemic control. A 2021 systematic review concluded that eating tree nuts regularly improved both fasting blood sugar and hemoglobin A1C in type 2 diabetics. We have some really cool studies showing that eating nuts and seeds can improve cognition. A 2023 study in adults aged 55 to 75 showed that eating just 3 servings of nuts and seeds per week slowed age-related cognitive decline. And a 2019 study showed that eating just 10 grams of nuts per day, that's again about a third of a serving, was associated with a 40% reduced risk of poor cognitive function. And a 2022 study of elderly adults showed that eating 2.5 servings of nuts per week reduced risk of cognitive impairment by 17%. The vitamin E and phytonutrients in nuts and seeds are really important for immune health, which is probably why a 2016 systematic review and meta-analysis showed that for every 1 ounce of nuts we consume daily, risk of dying from an infectious disease drops by 75%. A 2022 systematic review concluded that higher nut consumption was associated with lower risk of depression, better mood state, and fewer depressive symptoms in the overall population. There are quite a few studies showing that eating nuts and seeds regularly reduces risk of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. A 2023 systematic review and meta-analysis showed that higher nut consumption reduced risk of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease by 10%. And a 2016 systematic review showed that for every 1 ounce serving of nuts we consume daily, risk of respiratory disease mortality drops by 52%. Now, nuts and seeds get a bad rap because they're pretty energy-dense foods. So I think it's particularly interesting to note that higher nut consumption is associated with a lower risk of overweight and obesity. A 2021 meta-analysis measured that at a 7% lower risk. And of course, eating nuts and seeds regularly just makes us healthier overall. As measured by all-cause mortality, an indirect way to measure overall health and longevity. A 2020 analysis showed that consuming 4 servings of nuts and seeds per week reduced risk of all-cause mortality by 23%. And a 2016 meta-analysis showed that 10 grams of nuts per day, which is about 2.5 servings per week, was associated with an 18% reduced risk of all-cause mortality.
How much of them do we have to eat to gain all these health benefits?
When you look at this body of scientific evidence as a whole, we see it really doesn't take much to yield huge health benefits over time. I think a really strong case can be made for aiming for 3 or more servings of nuts and seeds per week. Importantly, the benefits cap out at about 1 serving per day. So maybe thinking of it as somewhere between 3 and 7 servings per week. And a serving is just 1 ounce. So that's about what would fit in the palm of your hand. That would translate to about 1/4 cup for whole nuts, about 3 tablespoons for chopped nuts, and 2 tablespoons for a nut butter.
I've heard that some nuts, like macadamia nuts, are actually fruit and that peanuts are a legume. Do those also count?
Yes, when we're looking at categorizing foods in nutritional sciences, we use the culinary definitions for foods rather than the botanical ones. And that's because the same chemicals in foods that make them good for certain culinary purposes are nutrients. So when we're categorizing foods according to the nutrients they contain, they tend to match how we use those foods in the kitchen. So yes, even those nuts that are technically fruits or the seeds of a drupe or peanuts are all going to be categorized as nuts and seeds. And if you'd like to learn more about the benefits of nuts and seeds, check out my book, Nutrivore, available wherever books are sold and very discounted on Amazon right now. And if you're interested in learning more about the special nutrients and health benefits of all 12 Nutrivore Foundational Food families, check out my ebook, Nutrivore Foundational Foods, available at nutrivore.com/shop.